What's up, everybody? If you haven't seen it, go check out episode 9 right now. Here's your mission. I want you to pick an airline and create a sub-brand that is either a premier, VIP, or first business class sub-brand, whatever it is that you want to do. We're going to need to design a logo, and this could be a word mark, a combination mark, or anything that you can think of. Design at minimum 3 applications. This could be the cabin menu, ticket, patterns, packaging, banners, billboards. That's too much. The judging criteria will be based on these following points. 1, appropriateness. 2, flexibility, longevity, luxury, and applications. The designers were checking in with me midpoint in the airline design challenge. Did anybody drastically alter the direction which they headed in, or was it more of the same? You get lost in the woods, and it happens to all of us. I would have presented me more. I think you did a lot of good work, and you've made a lot of progress. And now we're ready to see what they came up with. Arun, what do you have for us?
When we got the assignment, my first reaction was to select 3 Indian airlines, which were SpiceJet, Indigo, and Vistara. What I did was I went on their website, looked at what their current about page says about themselves. Their tagline is fly the new feeling. After I selected Vistara, what I did was I read about everything from their press releases to their about page, and from the agency who did their current branding, why the name Vistara itself. I created a name from it, but then after the meeting from Chris, it turns out that the name wasn't really good. I went back to the drawing board, noted down everything, how I want the new premium class to feel, and then started noting down names accordingly. The first few choices were Bliss by Vistara and Serenity by Vistara. Vistara has been derived from the Sanskrit word Vistar, which basically means limitless expanse. When you look at a limitless expanse, you feel very peaceful, very calm, and basically you feel serene. Once I had decided the name, the next step was to basically find out who would actually use this. So I made 2 user profiles. One was a young person who just wants to have new experiences, and once or twice a year they go for a vacation. The other one was someone like a CEO or something who travels frequently, and Vistara would definitely target them because they would want them to have that feeling of not having to worry about anything and everything is taken care of. Now the next step in the process was to basically create stylescapes to get a better understanding of the visual language. I wanted to have a lot of white space around it and clean looking visuals, not too bold, very modern. So what I did was first I made a stylescape for Vistara's current branding itself, because I wanted to understand their current visual language. Next step was to create a logo. Instead of creating a completely new mark, what I tried to do was take the current Vistara logo and derive something from it, because the current Vistara logo in itself is old mathematical, Hindu kind of device which denotes the center of the universe, all things balanced. So what I tried to do was I tried to trace it and derive something from it. Ended up creating a blooming lotus, which is related to peace and yoga and meditation. So I created that logo, and then what I did was I created a double stroke so that it kind of looks like the current Vistara logo. And then I also decided to go with a serif font, a Baskerville. That is a pretty obvious choice because I wanted to also feel very classy and premium. I'm pretty happy with the logo design. After I was done with that, what I did was I created another stylescape for Serenity, where I tried to make a similar visual language as Vistara, but a bit different, which kind of feels much more upper class than the current branding, having so clean and a lot of white space around it kind of a look. So that's what I tried to do with the stylescape, the visual language that I went with for Serenity. Now that all of the visual pieces were in place, the next step was to basically design a few applications to showcase the identity, and I decided to go ahead with the boarding pass, billboard, and envelope, which comes with a vanity kit that once you board you get. Basically, with the applications, I wanted to focus more on communication and messaging, the feeling of not having to worry about while you're traveling. But if you look at the final visuals, final output of the whole branding, the whole idea was not to go way off in the current Vistara branding and still keep it somewhat of a similar visual language, same pinkish sky cloud. That's why I didn't go way off in the color palettes. It was basically not create something very different or very upper class, but just have something VIP.
Okay, I'm just gonna pause here for a second because Arun has come a really long way since the last time in which we saw his work. I was a little nervous. I don't know if you were, but he didn't do too much. And in a way, I wish he got here during the midpoint because I can already see some problems. So Arun, while you were showing me the stylescape of the original brand of Vistara, I was like, this looks really good. This looks really bold, it's beautiful. And then you showed me what you're doing with Serenity. First of all, I like the name. It feels like it fits, and without getting too far ahead of myself, I think I like where you're going in terms of the general direction. But when I look at Serenity as a stylescape, I can already see lots of problems. You put a gentleman in here in a business suit. He looks a little bit older, more mature, looks like he travels well and he has good taste. And then everything in it does not fit with him. It feels very pastel. It feels like it could be a wellness spa. It feels like it could be a makeup brand. It doesn't feel like it fits with the Vistara brand and in meeting what I would expect his style and taste to be like. That's the biggest problem right now, because even if you executed every piece of identity for your new brand Serenity in this exact style, I would feel like you may have missed the mark. And so there's a part of me that wished that you had done this earlier, that you had committed to doing some design work and putting yourself out there so I can give you this kind of feedback. Well, I'm not gonna harp on history. We need to move forward. So let's dive into the actual design that you did. I like the name, Serenity. It sounds good. It's easy to say. It feels like it's keeping with the brand. And the icon that you came up with, this lotus blossom, I think it's actually a really nice mark. And what I like more about it is it feels like you went in and deconstructed the Vistara symbol, which looks like a star. I think there's some kind of mathematical interlocking beauty geometry part to it that I think is really nice. And you very carefully deconstruct that and create another object. And I think that's a very clever and smart strategy on how you can do a brand extension. Take something from the original, pull some of that DNA out, and reconstitute it into something else. And I think this is quite nice. It doesn't quite have the same interlocking qualities, but I think it's a good design. It's solid, it's simple, it's recognizable. It's all those things that we look for in a mark. And I'm gonna get a little nitpicky now. I'm gonna dive in and look at your kerning. And I think the kerning is a little bit off, and I'll show you where. Now, usually, you guys, I don't wanna spend too much time on this because this is one of the most foundational skill sets that you're gonna have in terms of letter spacing. What you look for is the most difficult kerning pairs and then design everything around that. And I'll show you right now what I think are the most difficult kerning areas. This is gonna be a tricky area because whenever you have a diagonal next to an open space letter like T, that's gonna be a problem because as tight as you can push that, that creates a certain volume. The same thing happens with the R, the leg of the R, and the E. You can already see now by me cross-hatching through this that there's a lot more space here, volume-wise, not space-wise, volume-wise than here. And there's a lot of different ways you can think about it. You can think about as if you were pouring sand into here and filling up space. How much sand did it take up? And you can see right now we have a real problem because between the S and E, there's very little space. And if you step back, you can see that you need to push these letters apart. Those are arrows for pushing them apart, okay? It feels like the E-R-E combination feels really good. So then you look at the R-E-N and you go from letter to letter, and then that's how you block it out. So right now, I already can tell you the S needs to be farther out. Now, I think you just said that you picked the typeface Baskerville. It's a good classic serif typeface, and it has some really nice qualities to it. I don't know, this might need a little bit of a flourish. Otherwise, it just feels as if you've typed something in. Where can you do that? Perhaps you can take the leg of the R and you could drop it down a little bit, just a little bit, and create a little bit of a customization here, just so it feels like it's customized for this. Now, obviously I didn't draw it right because it got too thick, but that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for just a little bit of a tweak so that it feels like they can own it. You might also do an initial larger letter, like the S, making it a little bit taller, and the Y, that might solve some of your spacing issues as well. The Vistara, sometimes you don't need to make it all centered. You can make it asymmetrically balanced by shifting it over to the right, maybe under this area right here. So maybe you can shift that there, and it could probably still work and fit within that little pocket. We're just trying to make a tight of configuration as possible. The next thing that I might encourage you to do is to play around with the scale between the symbol of the lotus blossom and the word mark itself. Sometimes when you scale this out to be that wide, it might feel a little disproportionate. I think I want to focus a little bit more on the lotus flower personally. So maybe we can scale it down. Just gut instinct tells me about 80% or so to achieve a little bit of a more balanced lockup. Okay, let's look at the other pieces of your identity. The stationary card, I think, is one of your most successful pieces of design because I like seeing this royal purple, little hint of the gold and the silver word mark that you've got. However, I think the mock-up needs a little work. It feels more like a color and it doesn't have that metallic hot foil stamping that I like to see in these kinds of things. It should have a brilliance to it, should sparkle, and should catch my eye. But otherwise, I think this is a very nice application. Now, if you're Sagi Haviv, this looks like a slap-on logo. You guys know what a slap-on logo is? You take a logo and you slap it on something. There isn't anything else that you're doing. Now, I noticed in your stylescape, you created an interesting pattern, or you found a pattern. I would have liked to see that in here. Or perhaps the edge of the card could be silver or gold, so it has a little bit more of a premium quality to it. Those of you guys that are new to print, all these little touches, these little printing techniques that you use can add a lot of that premium feel just in the way that it's applied. So there's a tip for you. Now, let's take a look at billboard or an ad. It says experience a new feeling, Serenity. Now, here's the thing. You're talking about white space. Now, I understand the reason why a lot of us associate premium with white space, but a different term for white space is negative space. And why do I make that distinction? Because it literally does not have to be white. Some people think having white space or negative space means you have to have white. That's not true at all. Black can be negative space. Gold can be negative space. It just means there's not a lot of activity going on those spaces, okay? Now, when I look at this, my first impression is it feels like, I'm sorry, kind of a mall ad for a massage parlor. Like, you have 15 minutes, I'm gonna give you a little back rub. That's what it feels like. This does not feel like that premium thing that we want it to be. Why is that? There's a couple problems. One is the original photography. The way that this gentleman's looked, the way he's styled and art directed, the way that the chair is photographed, it doesn't look great. It looks very much like stock photography, and it doesn't have a great style to it. Next, when you comp in the clouds over him, it just literally feels like you slapped a layer on top, hit screen in Photoshop, and called it the day. And that's not what we want. Oftentimes, this is how I see ads for travel or airlines. This is what they typically look like, and we want to steer away from those typical images. I would have preferred if you'd done something a little bit more surreal or abstract or representative of the feeling of premium class versus literally showing somebody sleeping in the clouds. That's no bueno. That's not good. All right. Next, over here, you've got a lot of elements going on for something that's supposed to be about Serenity. And I think that's because you have too much copy and everything is very similar in size. I'll mark this up. This is a certain size. They all feel very similar in size. And when you talk about negative space, you need to break things up or make things a lot smaller so you have room to breathe. This is not it. You've got three colors. You have the deep purple color, you have the green, and then you have the yellow gold color. That's three colors in three chunks of information. That is too much, my friend. And personally, I think you would have been better served if you found something that had a little bit more contrast and less of that pastel-y color look. That's that kind of feminine, cosmetic, beauty salon vibe that you're going for, which is not appropriate for this. So I think in appropriateness, you might have missed the mark there. Let's see what else you've done. Okay, in terms of the ticket itself, I think this looks good. There's not a lot of design for me to critique here because basically you put the logo in, you hit it with a bit of color, and the rest I think isn't something that we've designed or changed too much, and there's probably limited amounts of what you can do there. I would have loved to see, again, some of that pattern. I don't know if we have to repeat Vistara here. I think this could have been better if you had a nice pattern some kind of design that was repeating over here that connected it to the other side. I think that could have looked really good. I don't know what else you could have done here. There's not a lot of space for design. So probably not the best application to pick. So now I'm taking a look at the kit envelope that you would get that welcomes you on board. Here's the thing, you're a young guy, I get it. It's hard for young people to think about luxury, but this definitely does not feel luxurious to me. There could have been a sheet of vellum that lays over this. There could have been something that feels more hand done or ornate, something that feels really custom, and this does not feel that way. And if you remember with Emily and myself when we're doing Emerald, we pretty much used all the printing tricks that we could, because in an imaginary world, we have an infinite budget and we can do whatever we want. So we had handwritten notes, hot wax seals, we had foil stamping, we had all kinds of really interesting printing techniques that raises that premium quality. This, unfortunately, doesn't feel that way. It feels like it was color copied on a card and printed out, and that was that. The other thing is, I'm never a fan of centered type for these kinds of things. I think we need to get away from just doing centered type. It feels a little lazy, to be honest. It feels too easy. And I think there was a golden opportunity, no pun intended, to use color, blocks of color, to do something more interesting with the lotus blossom pattern. Not feeling it here. Okay, that's it. Time for me to score how you did. Okay, next up is Sharif. Now, Sharif came out of the gate pretty strong, so I have high expectations of where he's going to take this. Let's take a look at what he's done.
I picked Swiss Airlines for this challenge. I just remember walking into the airplane and it was very different. The cabin was so white and the chairs were tightly packed, but they were black leather, and it had this look about it very different from any flight I've ever taken. I wanted to work on this Swiss Airlines brand and create this first-class experience. I also wanted to use the Swiss brand that sort of exists in our collective subconscious, this very rich heritage and culture. I started out this project by running core. I did the two first exercises, which is like, the first is the brand attributes exercise and the second are user profiles. It really helped me kind of get in the headspace of where I wanted to take this brand and make sure that I had a certain roadmap in my mind. So I knew what to create the stylescapes based on and how to take them further into a visual identity. After these two exercises, I was able to think about a name more clearly because I knew which direction I wanted to take the brand. I think Crimson is a very strong name. It aligns with a lot of the attributes I came up with. It's a sexy name, it's a vivid color, it's a strong color. It has those royal associations. The first stylescape for me was going to be all about capturing this feeling I had on the Swiss Airlines flight. The white cabin, the black leather seats, very clean, very modern, very minimal. The second stylescape, I tried to go a little further. I researched certain brands based on the user profiles I created, like what would these users be using on a daily basis, what kind of brands they'd be interacting with. I went this sort of more traditional approach to luxury, where you have darker tones, deeper greens, serif font. Discussing it with Chris later on gave me definitely the clarity I needed and the confidence to pursue the initial stylescape, which spoke to me more. I started out trying to create a logo, playing around with certain elements. I started playing around with the cross. I moved on to a star, a diamond, abstract shapes that don't necessarily have to translate into something physical in the real world, but the associations have to be positive and have to align with the brand that I have in mind. During the second week of design, I had a call with Spencer. We were discussing how things were going, taking each other's opinion on our work, and I showed him the pattern I had going on, which I didn't really like, and I guess he didn't either. He shared his screen with me, and he sort of took the logo, outlined it, duplicated it multiple times, and had this very simple pattern come out of it. But I really liked it. I took the pattern and further refined it. Basically just removed the diamond shape from the logo and had the circles create the diamond shape themselves. And I'm really happy I got the chance to bounce ideas off of him, because in the creative process, for me at least, I always find it very helpful to show your work to other people. So my initial sort of instinct was to create this all-black, sexy boarding pass for the Crimson class, which I almost did, but then halfway I realized that it wouldn't work in real life. Ticket printers only print in black in this monospace font, so they have to have white space. So I ended up designing the boarding pass accordingly. Overall, I had so much fun working on this challenge. It's definitely the most fun I've had in the Young Guns so far. It was very challenging. I never thought I'd work on an airline identity project before, but it was very interesting for me. This is the first project I ever designed for applications because I knew I had to create mockups and I knew I had to apply my design at the end of the day. So I was really very conscious of how it was going to be applied, and sometimes I even designed on the mockup itself. It makes you more connected to the outcome in the end, and takes you away from this, you're just working on a screen all the time and you're disconnected from what the design will be at the end of the day.
Woo! All right, Sharif, you've done a really good job. I like how far you've gone with this and just the thoroughness of your thinking and your design exploration. I can tell you're a little bit more of a seasoned designer than some of our young guns. Okay, this is evident in the work that you do and the thoroughness of your thinking. Okay, so now let's pull this up here. Okay, I'm taking a look at the ticket. I really like seeing how you color corrected and swapped out the passport so it looks like a Swiss passport. I think it was really smart how you color corrected this photo to make it look like a Swiss passport. It really completes the image, and this is a great shot. So a lot of times just choosing the right photograph to use is everything. And I can believe that in the back there, it's a Swiss airplane. I don't know, I can't tell, but it feels really good. The art direction on this, the guy with a blue suit in his hand and a fancy watch, I presume, holding the passport, really completes it. Even though the only part you've really truly designed is the ticket itself. Now, I want to talk about the ticket for a second here. I like seeing the ticket in context versus just seeing the ticket by itself. And the reason why I like that is because there's a nice hit of color and you're thinking through, how does this design live in the real world versus just on my screen? And I think that's a really smart thing. So that's a good tip for all you guys that are paying attention. Try to show your design in context and how somebody's going to use it so you can properly evaluate it and make considerations. The thing that I noticed though is in the flat design, the layout, the red wasn't as deep and saturated as what I'm used to seeing for Swiss Air. And I think that's really important that you get that really bright, dark, rich red. And this one feels a little bit lighter on the spectrum. So let's make sure that we're making it color accurate there because it looked a little light. And also the blue, I think, could use a little saturation to make it pop a little bit. I liked how you resolved the pattern, and this is a great example of using your colors and your patterns to make a more interesting ticket without complicating the design of the ticket itself. So good job on that. Let's take a look at some other images. Next up, the luggage tag. I like this application. This shows you that the mark, if it's strong and it's designed well, can be separated as a component that is a quick identifier. And I like this layout quite a lot. You have a hit of the blue. I think I see a little bit of a pattern in there. It's very light. And then the tag itself, beautifully done. Great application. I love this part. So you really have pulled out all the stops going into the uniform itself and kind of indicating certain things. I'm not sure if this is a mock-up or whatever, but it looks really good. And it shows that you're thinking through the entire design. Even from the stitching of the cuff itself, I like that. There's a little bit of a white embroidered thing on the sleeve. And I like all these little touches. And usually when you do these kind of monogram sleeves, it can get a little crazy, it can get a little cheesy, but just doing white on white, doing it very subtly so you can barely see it, I think is a really nice and classy touch, befitting a premium class. Okay, looking at the scarf. And I think the scarf is really nice that you have the color palette integrated and just a little identifier to call attention to it. Again, very tastefully done. If somebody wasn't totally focused on that, they might not even notice, but I like it a lot. So many applications, even in your menu design. I noticed that when you were showing us your process, you color corrected things, you swapped out certain parts, and the little tissue or the fabric that's the headrest protector has the emblem in it. I like that. I like the repeating patterns and the colors, and the art direction of this shot, it looks really good. Feels very premium to me. The last piece I'm going to critique is the crimson billboard. Okay, This is one of those ones where I think you're on the right track. I like that you're using the cross as a focal device to help our eye concentrate on that person. But I think making it pure white, I think if you had just played around with transparency, making it feel like it was a spot varnish or some kind of clear translucent thing so it wasn't so overpowering, I think that could have been a really good look. It could have been really nice if you made it feel like it was etched from glass so that we're seeing through it, so there's a little bit of diffraction of the image underneath, just so it doesn't feel like a slap-on mark. Otherwise, I think this is really nice. There's a little mouse type on here, which I don't think you need for a billboard. Typically, when you look at a billboard, you only have a few seconds to read it. So all that legal mumbo jumbo at the bottom, we don't need, don't do it, you don't need it. And then the last thing is the new face of Swiss luxury probably needs to be 1.5 to 2 times bigger than that because it's very difficult to read, especially where you place it. A lot of complex things going on. You could have done a selective focus thing where you blurred out parts of the image and darkened a little bit. That would have aided the legibility of it. Okay, I see that you darkened it a little bit, but we need to go a little bit further. Other than that, I think you did a great job. It's time for me now to score. Let me know if you agree with my critique of what Sharif has done in the comments below. Okay, next up is Sean Campbell, who also came out pretty strong out of the gate. He's a very young designer, and I gave him a hard time about working and pumping gas at the gas station, but I think this young person has a career in design ahead of him. Let's see what he came up with.
The airline I chose for my project is American Airlines. I chose American because while I was doing my research, I noticed that they don't already have a well fleshed out, separately branded first class service that some other airlines have. I went to sites like Dribbble, Behance, Google, Instagram, stuff like that, and I just searched a bunch of keywords that I thought might be relevant. I gathered a bunch of images, and then later I went back and curated them even further and grouped them into different mood boards. And I used those mood boards to base the stylescapes from. The first stylescape I created was very modern, very vivid colors, bright red, bright blue. And then the second direction was more reserved with some less saturated colors, darker overall. I introduced a gold to kind of make it feel a little bit more premium. And then Chris helped me to eliminate that choice. And I think the first stylescape was a lot stronger anyway. From that, I just refined the stylescape with some feedback that Chris gave me. And then that was the final stylescape that I worked off of. I came up with a name pretty early on during the process, and the name I chose is Ace. I think it's a good name for a couple of reasons. First of all, the word Ace itself, the adjective form at least, means of high quality or rank. And since I'm branding a premium service here, I think that fits perfectly. Also, I'm sure you've heard the term Ace Pilot before. Also, the word Ace starts with an A, which is important for Americans' naming scheme that they have going on with a couple of the different sub-brands that they already have, such as Advantage, spelled with 2 A's, which is their rewards card, I think. Once the stylescape was set in place, I was comfortable to move forward and start working on the logo. And so I busted out the sketchbook and I just started playing with forms. I knew that the logo mark was gonna be based off of some sort of stripe form because I wanted to use that as a motif throughout the branding as I established in the stylescape. And so I started playing with some stripe forms like that, and eventually I came to something that I liked. There was a concept that really stood out to me, and so I just took that into Illustrator, cleaned it up, typeset Ace with Frutiger, with some tight tracking, and that was the logo. Going into the actual design process, the first thing I took a stab at was boarding pass. I came up with this design that was using a pattern I created based off of, again, the graphic off the American carriers. And I just wasn't happy with how it looked, and I just thought it was going in the wrong direction. So I went back to the drawing board, and I started playing with the logo and seeing how I can extrapolate it and maybe make some sort of pattern out of it. And that's exactly what I did. I started playing around with an ad design and came up with something I really liked. I used the same kind of principles and tried doing the boarding pass again. I was happy with how it came out. So once that was kind of set in place, doing the rest of the stationery was a breeze. Overall, the project was a lot of fun to work on, and I'm satisfied with the end result. There are some flaws and some things I would change, so I do plan to continue working on it and flesh it out some more to put in my portfolio. I think I did a bad job of showing the identity fitting within Americans' already existing branding, And I also definitely have to work on my presenting skills, I realized, like major.
Wow, Sean, I'm just blown away. I gotta say, for a person of your age and the sophistication of your design and your aesthetic and how deep you went into this project, you know what it tells me? You had fun doing this, and this is really important. A lot of you guys were working on your projects and you kind of got stuck. Who do you have to blame for that? Whoever picked that company to work on, that's who you got to blame, and that person's looking at you right back in the mirror. So here, it's challenging to work on such an iconic brand as American Airlines. The original design was created by Massimo Vignelli, legendary designer, and then later on redesigned. So you've got some big shoes to fill. What are you gonna do with this? And now I see what you've done, and I think it's brilliant. I'm going through this and I'm just blown away at how good you are. Forget about your age, forget about what school or if you even went to school, how good you are, man. There's some really raw, deep, talented person inside of you that's waiting to scream and break free of whatever it is that you're doing. I encourage you to continue down this path. Now let's get into it now that I've thrown out all the superlatives. All right, okay. Look at this, my gosh. What you did with the tickets, the front and the back, creating a pattern and mixing it around and using different colors and showing the gradients. I see a system in here and the system looks really great. Now, chances are you will not get away with a ticket like this because there probably is a lot more type that you have to incorporate, but I'm not gonna nitpick here. I think the design is beautiful and look how you're thinking through it. Just a simple barcode and maybe your seat number, and that's all you really need at that point. And when you tear it apart, you have that really nice color blocking pattern that you have on the back, which really connects it to the design overall. When you showed me your process of designing the A, it's very simple and there's a reference to the current design, but abstract enough so that it feels related, but it's not derivative of the original mark. And I like that. And that's a very tricky thing to do, to feel like we share DNA, but it doesn't feel like you simply copy and pasted something in. Really good job there. Man, I'm just blown away. Even this one layout is good. I like the pattern. Maybe you've been paying attention to what Emily's been doing. Just maybe. Okay, I like all the different applications that you made next to the kiosk, and you can see a giant wallpaper. So your design works small and it works really big in scale. And people love seeing that. Clients are like, wow, I can see that this is going to last us a long time. So in terms of longevity, you're definitely painting a very clear picture that this is going to work as a system, and that's really important to do. I also like how you've handled the priority baggage drop and check-in for the kiosk at American Airlines Ace. I like it. It feels really well thought out. I like seeing all these applications. It's really neat how you're able to design so many different applications. Probably my favorite of your applications though. It's a toss-up between the ticket and the menu. Ooh, this looks so good. I like that you designed the napkins and the plate and how you've put it all together in this mock-up. It looks really good. I also like the skinny format, the skyscraper format, so it's not a square blocky thing and it's folded in half. Probably you don't need to saddle stitch this thing because the menus are not really that deep that you have multiple pages. And that's just a little technical term for the stapled part. Now let me get into the menu. You mentioned that you use Futur as your typeface, and it's really nicely, cleanly typeset here. Now, if I were just able to sit down with you a little bit, Sean, what I would tell you to do is tighten up your leading. The leading, as you guys know, is a spacing between lines, and I think this just needs to be a little tighter because what's happening right now is I'm starting to feel the air that's going through, and I start to read the negative space between the lines. So I like the contrast between the bold Futur and the regular or light Futur. I just want the body part, the 8-ounce New York strip, to be tighter together, okay? Otherwise, I think it's a really good design. Now, I saw in your deck, I mean, you even did a presentation deck. How above and beyond do you want to go? Are there points for like bonus things, brownie points? I don't know, but you've gone above and beyond, and I love that you're thinking towards the future. I think this is going to be a strong piece for your portfolio, but I saw little strips of transparency in your deck somewhere. I would have liked to see some of that. So that could be done with a spot varnish so it's not too over the top. So you have a little bit of a dull and shiny finish, and I like that. Okay. I also like your business card. Your business card is excellent. I like the typeset. It looks really good. I like the bold color. I like the deconstructed components of the logo. Again, we need to tighten up the leading here. Just tighten it up. Don't feel like you have to take up so much space. I think it would look much better if it just took up that much space. And next is the alignment with your name. I think we need to refine this a little bit. It just feels like that was thrown in there. And let's just go with the rule. Don't use too many different point sizes and too many different weights. And I think you don't need to. If you just made that the same point size and lined it up with that over there, I think it would have been fantastic. And dare I say, if somebody were to look at this with a little bit of tweak in your typography, they would not even be able to tell if you had just finished corporate identity design at Art Center or if you're some kid from the East Coast. Good job, my man. You even did the bus boards. Look at that. You wrote some copy, soar like an eagle. Very nice design. I like it. Good mock-up. Really well done. Nice saturated. So one of the things that I want to point out here is in this mock-up, you use a very saturated contrasty image, which supports the saturated and contrasty poster that you designed. If you picked something that was very golden and retro looking, your billboard or your bus board will look very foreign to it. So it's nice that you integrated those two things. Now, there's a good chance that you color corrected this. I don't know. If you did, kudos to you for realizing that and having the instincts to do that. My least favorite part of your identity is the personalized envelope. I think we're missing a lot of opportunities to do something really cool and interesting, fun and different, because this literally is something that's handed out to passengers in the ACE Club. And I think we could have done something with the envelope instead of just being a pure red envelope. We could have had some design components. We could have parts of the letter connect with the envelope itself. What do I mean by that? Let me try and draw this, see what happens here. So if I have the envelope like this, as you draw out the components. So let's say this is the card, right? Before you pull it out, it says hi, right? Maybe there's a design element that crosses over and connects the inside and the out. So when you pull it out, it's two parts to a puzzle. I think you could have definitely played around with some of the patterns that you've generated thus far. And again, the typesetting feels a little antiquated. It feels a little bit too slapped on, being very centered. This is the weakest part of your identity system. I want to make one last little comment. And I saw that in your design process in drawing the mark for American Airlines ACE Club, that there was a moment in there where you designed the mark and the blue strip was down here. And I thought that looked better to me because it felt like an abstracted A, where this offset just feels like two elements versus an A. And it's a very minor thing, but I think if you looked at it, look at that again and see if it improves. And if you like it better, do that instead for your portfolio. Okay, let me know how I did. Was I going too easy on Sean or was I not praising him enough? Okay, next up we have Spencer, the youngest of the young guns. And he got off to a rough start. He was hesitant in his design, so let's see what he came up with.
The airline I picked is Lufthansa because they're a German airline. So I can kind of stretch outside my comfort zone, do something I've never done before because I do not know an ounce of German. But also because I think the existing identity system is really strong and I felt that it had a lot of elements that could be expanded upon, played on. So my initial approach when trying to come up with a name was to kind of deconstruct the name Lufthansa and then kind of find variants of it. I was playing around with German for forever until I stumbled across the word nest. And nest, I didn't think of anything at first, but you know, it is kind of tangent related to you know, the larger picture of cranes and of birds and of flying in general. I ended up picking nest, one because of its relation to it, two because of its qualities that it kind of brings to mind. I think when I think of nest, I think of, you know, family and of warmth and comfort. Nest is a word that works in both English and German. Spelled the same, pronounced the same, you know, same meaning. So I thought, like, really with a triple whammy, I'd just, you know, go ahead and do that one. A lot of thinking and exploration kind of went into understanding how this smaller brand had to fit into the larger brand. So the feather mark was actually pulled just right from the call with Chris. I think he just slipped it in as a slight suggestion. And as I went along the process, it actually seemed more and more the right fit. It was a matter of really what was the style of the feather going to look like? Was it going to feel more organic or was it going to feel more machined? And kind of, you know, what were the visual traits that would tie it into the larger brand? I ended up picking the mark that I did because I felt that it was a good neutral mark that the brand grow into over time rather than it's saying a whole lot explicitly. The logo I made was actually created from just repurposing parts of the Lufthansa logo. I kind of just took the head of that crane and used that on its side and kind of used that as a foundation to kind of build my mark upon. These things help draw a connection between the two brands. So as far as color goes, I actually just held on to the blue that Lufthansa uses, but I kind of expanded the palette to kind of add a lot more of these vibrant hues. So after I had the name and the idea, that's when I started to kind of throw things together and start to build a stylescape, which really helped me narrow my focus about what this brand was going to look like, and helped me not only in the visual development of it and what the identity was going to feel like, but also in what the brand essence was going to feel like, what the larger picture of the brand was. Because Lufthansa uses Helvetica, I figured I would try to use something, fancier to kind of, spice up the higher end brand. I ended up going with Dido, and I thought Dido was a really good choice because it does, kind of have that, modernist serif, very fancy and elegant aura. But I also used it because I think that Dido actually shares a lot of, skeletal similarities to Helvetica. The mock-ups were something that I ended up investing a lot of time into. Because there's not a whole lot of airport signage mock-ups out there, I kind of had to, reconfigure other ones and really get creative with the ways that I were to create these things. To conclude, I think that this whole project was a lot harder than I had originally anticipated, but it's great because I learned a lot, had a lot of fun along the way. In hindsight, there's a lot of things I probably would have done differently, but I think that I'm just grateful to have had the opportunity and to be able to learn like this. Some things I think I learned for next time is always come prepared, and that presentation is everything.
All right, wow, okay, Spencer, first off, I'm relieved that you were able to take it this far. I like how you presented your thinking, and I wanna make a point of it. First, when you show this evolution of the existing bird and making it evolve into the feather, I think that's super smart because it's often very difficult for existing brands to see the connection between where they are, the legacy and equity they built, and where you're taking them and showing them in this very thorough, logical, step-by-step process you're taking them through, so it doesn't seem as foreign to them. It comes from something. I think you did a really good job. I think Mr. Paul Rand would be proud of you because this is how he would present his logos. So I think you really listened to the feedback instead of just taking the existing mark and cropping it and not doing that much with it. I think you were freed from that, liberated from it when you started to explore other things that can tie in with the parent brand, but not be so slavishly deferential to it. And I think that's the balance that you're trying to find. So good job, young man. Now, I'm gonna jump into the logo here. Now, you mentioned in your video that you chose Dido as a typeface. Normally I would say bravo, bravo, excellent typeface, love it, would use it for lots of different things. It does feel quite foreign to Lufthansa. Hopefully I'm saying that correctly. Now, first of all, I wanna say good name, good choice there, Nest, I like it, I get it, a bird, a nest. Welcome back to the nest. It kind of feels very comforting, protected, feels good. Okay, here's a little problem. I think it feels so foreign to German design. Lufthansa, it's like, and Dido just don't seem to want to dance together. It's too delicate, it's too fine, and I think you're potentially missing out on a great opportunity here, and I'm gonna show you what I mean. I'm gonna get into it. Okay. I think what you could have done is use the feather idea exactly the way you've drawn it, but integrate it with a more abstract symbol, and then just to use Helvetica and say Nest by Lufthansa in the same line, same weight, everything's the same. So let's focus on creating a nice symbol for this premium class. So what I'm thinking about is the letter N. So this is what I'll do. So every time I design something as a symbol or even a logo type, I'll draw out what a capital letter looks like. And usually it looks something like this, right? Usually that'll give me some ideas. And if I can think of what's another way of drawing an N, well, if I did a serif N, it look a little different, but not terribly different. It looks something like that, maybe. Yeah, maybe it would look like that, I don't know. So I'm looking at that And this is where you kind of let your creativity flow a little bit. If you look at the letter N, it's really two shapes, a triangle shape and a rectangle shape. Now, those are the guys that are paying attention. Don't get ahead of me because you know where I'm going with this. So if I were to fill this in, let me move this over a little bit. That can be seen as the letter N. You can also see the letter N by things like this, where you have a little vertical shape and a semicircle. So there's a curved top and a bottom, and you can just keep exploring that. And people will recognize this for what it is. Again, if I keep exploring, this shape also could be the letter N. And so I'm just trying to do something with Ness. Now, not that I've spent that much time on this, but I think if you were to use a simple shape like this, and you incorporated the feather right into it, I think your design would be done. I'm just gonna roughly draw it the way you've drawn it here. And I think the angles are like this. Now the proportions aren't quite right, but I think you get the idea. If you played around with this, maybe the scale is a little off. Maybe the feather is here. I think the feather needs a little bit bigger next to the triangle. And so if you created a shape on a lockup like that, I think then all you need to do is take the word nest, to do it by Lufthansa, you would be done. I think that's the way to go. If you had just done that, I think focus on simple geometric shapes, use the feather as an element that ties it back into the parent brand, and you're going to be golden. Okay, now let's go back to your other applications. The one that I'm blown away by the most is this one, is your 3D extruded metal letter form. This looks so convincing that I just can't believe it's Photoshop. I can't believe it's butter. It's amazing. Good job on this. So whatever you did to make this, use these kinds of comping skills in the future for your mock-ups. It looks very convincing. The metallic finish, the reflections, the 3D extrusion, the beveled edges, well done. Awesome job. Probably the best mock-up that we've seen thus far. Now, not to discredit anything that Connor's gonna come up with, but thus far, it's probably the best looking mock-up. Okay, I really like the sign. The sign is very smart, it's modern. I can see you trying to integrate the outline of the feather in here. I just don't think you need it. I think if you got rid of that, because that part feels fussy to me, and think about how to design this bold icon, letter N, and I think this looks really good. So your typography choice here in simplicity and color palette and the contrast between the two with a little hit of accent red, make it feel really good. I like it. Well done. And I also like your billboard. The billboard application integrates a diagonal element, a graphic element that mirrors the same angle as the feather of the nest. Smartly played. There's a pattern in here. I saw you designing it in your video. I'm not quite sure how that ties in with anything besides it being an abstract pattern. And that's okay if it doesn't tie in, but really I think that's what we need to work on. Now, again here, we need to do some art direction with photography because this looks like a really old photo. It needs to be art directed a little bit better. The lifestyle that you're going after, let's work on that, okay? Okay, for my initial kind of knee-jerk reaction, probably one of the most improved of all the young guns. From where you started, kind of very tentative in where you were gonna go with your design, not committing to anything, to kind of seeing it like this. I think you've done a great job. I hope you had fun. I saw that you admitted that this was harder than you thought. Yes, designing a airline identity system is very difficult, and that's why very few companies do it, and they get the big bucks. So if you wanna make the big bucks, aim high. Let me know if you guys think my suggestion with abstracting the letter N and integrating with the feather was the way to go and sidestepping the choice of Dido or serif typeface to begin with. Do you agree with me or do you think he should stick with the way he's designed it currently? Let me know in the comments below. Okay, last but not least, and heading into the home stretch to anchor this challenge is Connor Fowler. Really looking forward to seeing what he's doing because last time we spoke, he was very confident. He knows what he wants to do. So sometimes it's like, if you know what you want to do, just go for it. Let's see what he's done.
I've picked an airline called Jet2. Jet2 is a budget airline in the UK.
In the UK, a lot of the top airlines are budget airlines. I knew that Jet2 specifically didn't have any kind of VIP or luxury section. Their branding system was quite new, it was quite fresh, and it seemed very simplistic in its application. I wanted to stick to something that I knew I could start from the ground up, rather than having to kind of finesse my way around lots of different sections of other airlines. I began by gathering lots of Jet 2 related images, so that was things like photography, it was the inside of cabins, it was their what they look like when they go to events and corporate things, what the planes looked like, any kind of merchandise I could find. I couldn't find any kind of brand guidelines or brand rules or any kind of in-depth about page, so I had to build it up through the photography that they had online and that I could pull off Pinterest. After I dug a little deeper into the Jet 2 branding itself, I decided to dig up loads of images of what actual luxury airlines look like. I started to come across a lot more vintage photography. So we're talking flights from the like 50s, 60s, 70s, when first class and business class was kind of introduced, or luxury flying. And some of the things that would come up would be a bit ridiculous. As you can see from the sketches, what I'm doing is doing very, very rough layouts and general shaping to block it out, almost website wireframe style, just very rough. And then we're going in and gridding up the tag itself and building out that way. So having spoken to Chris and taken on all of his feedback, with the final presentation, what I've aimed to do is take the customer focused direction of Jet 2 and make sure that is continued through to Jet 2 VIP. So for the creation stage of the Jet 2 project, I've first focused on the logo design itself, making sure that the Helvetica typeface and the custom letters that we did fitted with the system that Jet 2 already had. Then it was moving on to the color palette, so I could make something that was contrasting enough to what they already had, but also worked as a cohesive system. So I started out by inverting the red, going for kind of a blue ice tone instead of the red fiery tone, and then built that out a bit further because it wasn't quite right. Then the tags themselves and the items that I picked, so the airline tag, the pin, and the cabin menu, needed to find the balance between super premium and like first class kind of metallic letterpress, all that type of stuff, and something that goes one step above kind of your very economy class rough paper printout with a printer that has no ink in it. I really enjoyed the project as a whole. It was difficult at the beginning to kind of go, well, which airline do I want to go with? How much research do I want to pick at the start before picking an airline? Or do I just pick one and go for it? The trickier bits came in when we were picking words for the name of it. I could have gone with something like Jet 2 Luxury or Jet 2 Premium or any other types of words. And as Chris said in his feedback, I could have gone for Jet 2X. But in the UK and Europe, we largely don't say 2x, you say 2 times. And if it was called Jet 2 times, that's like 2 timing. So I definitely can't pick that because that has really bad connotations. But those little challenges and little ideas all the way through the project kept cropping up, so that although the design style wasn't heavily influenced by it, what the messaging that came along with the branding overall was what I found most challenging, was finding something that was a good balance of what Jet 2 already had and what they could achieve in the future.
Okay, now that we've heard his presentation, I've got lots of different reactions here, and let's see if you guys agree with the way I'm going to feel about this and my own reaction to this. It seems like Connor has built up a very strong defense to why he wants to do what he wants to do, and that's totally okay. Oftentimes when I was teaching over the last 15 years at Art Center, you would come into encounter with 2 or 3 different types of students. There's a type of student that's open, that's a sponge, that wants to try everything and follow the teacher along the way. And then there's a student that says, you know what, I know what I'm doing, I know what's good for me, my career, my portfolio, and I will do what I need to do. And then there's some students in between. Connor definitely, the way he speaks and holds himself, a lot of confidence, and he's very strong-minded, strong-willed, so I'm not gonna try to tame that wild stallion, let it run. And now we get to see the fruits of his labor, and he ran wild all over the place. Now, I'm a little confused. I'm a little confused because you were given the opportunity to design a premium class airline, and what you've done instead is to choose an airline that's super budget, so you have to find your own brief in a way that's very limiting. I personally would have embraced this and picked an airline where I can go hog wild and do all the kinds of tricks. Now maybe strategically, if I'm getting into the mind of Connor Fowler, strategically you're saying everybody's gonna zig, guess what, I'm gonna zug. They can go upgrade and I'm gonna go downgrade because it really hampers what you can do. And we wanna make sure that your thinking is really consistent across the board. So if you say this really isn't a luxury class, it's just premium economy, which just is marketing speak to sell you a slightly more expensive seat. And I hate premium economy. Either put me in economy, put me in business class, but not in between because it sucks. It's no way, it's a fake way, premium economy. Those two words don't even belong together. It's like jumbo shrimp. This is where you need to be really clear because you're saying to the world, I'm deliberately making this look kind of low rent. I think that's good if you can consistently follow through. What I find a little bit odd is in your design, you've removed the jet from the logo, but you put the jet everywhere else. So how does this work with the parent brand? It almost feels like it's the same but different just to be different. Now get this part, Massimo Vignelli did a great job of just using Helvetica, and we've seen other designers use Helvetica and just keep everything super simple, very minimal, but somehow still achieve that high-end feel. And you could have done that by being very disciplined with your color choices and reproduction. You could have just picked one color, either black or white or blue and white, get rid of the gradient, saying we don't need extra colors, we're gonna keep it really simple. We're gonna use one typeface and keep everything bold and somewhat generic. Now, if you're a fan of art, if you've seen any of Damien Hirst's installations and his artwork, he uses a lot of pharmaceutical packaging as his inspiration. He changes the scale, he crops things differently, and he limits the color palette, but it looks really beautiful. I think that would have been a great way for you to go, to look at very utilitarian design for things like shipping containers, packaging, what they put on trains, cereal boxes, just on the bottom of things where nobody's paying attention. I love that kind of utilitarian design. It's really bold lines and really simple graphics. I think that would have been a great way to do this. And I think you touch on that. You dip your toe in there, especially with this tag. Where's my pen? Let me change the color here. Especially with this tag for Amsterdam. I think that's a close take on it. And I think this one's a close take on it, where you have type just kind of utilitarian broken apart. I get your inspiration. And I think here's where you need to play around with the design a little bit, maybe scale some things down and achieve that balance, because otherwise it doesn't feel designed. And I get it. I know that's the look you're going for. It's kind of undesigned design, as if nobody designed it. But it's very hard to pull that off and make it look like you know what you're doing. So I'm not sure this was entirely successful. I applaud you for being as confident, as bold as you are with what it is that you want to do. I just think you fell a little short because it feels like you're stuck in no man's land. You're threading that needle. Now, in the presentation, you showed us a tag that looked like it was made of paper, and then this extra ornamentation, the twine that was tied to the luggage, which throws me off because that's like really old and retro versus purely utilitarian. That's like decorative, whereas you want to be utilitarian. So this is where I think you need to be very clear at defining the visual language that you're taking from the moment you say go. You know, looking at your dinner menu, it's very simple. It's hard to make things very simple look good, and that's why not very many people are successful. I think you've done a serviceable job here. I'm gonna just point out a few things, okay? I think you could have easily taken the dinner menu, instead of making it centered on a page, justify it there so that it lines up with the rest of the menu, and possibly, otherwise I think that's good. I'm not sure what this blue border is. That feels fussy to me. Is that just the background, or is there literally a blue border that's not even across the board? That's a little confusing to me. So when you present something like this, just be more mindful. And I understand why you did this, because it's a white card on a white background, so you created a blue background here, and that's why you did it like this. So putting in a blue border like this really is just throwing me off a little bit. I just think that's a little presentation tip. Not a deal killer, but something that you want to be mindful of, okay? I'm also noticing the blues that you're using are inconsistent. The mock-up looks a lot deeper and darker and matte, where the blue on the right side here is very vibrant and saturated. So be mindful of that. I see that you're using the airplane icon, which is deconstructed from the original Jet 2 logo, but the way you're using it here is you're going maximal versus minimal. And I'm wondering why? You mentioned before like retro image and graphics. I'm not sure what happened to that idea or direction. I think that would have been a good time to use it. See, now here's the problem. As you're trying to make a pin for the airline, you realize you don't have a great icon to work with. It's just a word mark. And so then you use the airplane itself to be a base to hold the word mark. And see, this is where I think some of the trappings of your design are going to come back to bite you in the butt. And I'm seeing it here. I think that's all I got for you. Hey guys, let me know what you think. Did Connor do the right thing? Should you stick to your guns and say, this is what I want to do? Or should you be more open to input? And what's the point of all of this anyways, if you're going to have to listen to somebody else and do a self-initiated project? So on the one hand, I applaud him for doing what he wants to do, but that's really risky for a show like this where you're going to get critiqued by a guy like me. Let me know if you agree or disagree. Comment below. Woo! That was a lot of ground to cover in a very short amount of time. I'm exhausted talking about this, but hopefully you're feeling a little different. You're feeling invigorated because you're getting to hear how a creative professional like myself would critique work. Hopefully I've given you some tips and advice on how to present, how to build mockups, and how to improve your design. If you want to, feel free to participate in the Airline Design Challenge yourself. So without further ado, after tallying up the scores through much deliberation, came down to the wire, but here's who won the Airline Design Challenge. Congratulations! No! If you're intrigued by some of the things that we talked about on this episode and you want a deeper dive and you want to get a little bit more confident with what you're doing and learn some new tools and techniques and fundamentals, be sure to look up our logo design fundamentals course as well as our typography course, and last but not least, our brand spanking new Stylescape course.